in the same way that someone on end of life care doesn't experience that, neither does a fetus. So I don't understand, I guess. I just feel like it's a bit logically inconsistent. Engaging in an act that may result in X outcome doesn't then justify X outcome.
When you're having sex, that's like the fundamental thing between men and women, like since the age of time that
Sex
we've.
isn't just for reproduction, though. Plenty of people have sex for just enjoyment, personal enjoyment. You can't walk in at 9 months and be like, hey, my baby's due in 2 weeks, but I don't want a baby anymore. Like there's not a doctor that's gonna do an abortion procedure like that. Innately, in most people, they place more of a moral value on persons, like the who rather than the what of just a human, because I agree with you, and I think most people would agree with, even if a fetus is viable, if the procedure if birth would absolutely kill the mother and the only way for her to live would be to get an abortion, I think most people would probably bite the bullet and say, yeah, she can get the abortion. Backed by popular demand, we have yet another debate, this time on the subject of abortion. So let me know in the comments what you guys thought of the arguments that were made, and as always, who you think won. Today we're debating pro-life versus pro-choice, the abortion question, and for me, I believe that throughout history, the removal of societal or fundamental rights has always, away from women or anyone in general, has always led to a slippery slope of negative consequences, especially with women, from women's suffrage to rights to own property. If we zoom out even, I mean, a lot of eugenics was done this way. When you take away a woman's societal or fundamental right of self, the fundamental right of self from anyone, it's historically led to bad things. With abortion, you can now see child rape victims being forced to carry to term, women fleeing states to terminate otherwise non-viable pregnancies, or risking death and infection if they don't. Data on the matter shows that states with these stricter abortion laws have had a 7% increase in total maternal mortality. That's in a Tulane study. States with licensed physician requirements have had a 35% increase, and those with Medicaid funding restrictions saw a 29% increase, all higher during pregnancy or within 42 days thereof. NIH researchers also have predicted that a total abortion ban would increase maternal death by 21 to 26%. So I do grant that human life begins at conception, but I am more concerned with personhood, and there's no scientific consensus on the two being the same. And with the fetus, it potentially could become a person, but could in and of itself implies that it's not yet, while the mother, of course, has been and always will or will continue to be. And when we talk about things societally granted, they're done so to people. When we talk about rights, we don't talk about what gets rights, we talk about who gets rights. When we talk about something or someone dying, we don't talk about what died, we talk about who died. Personhood is what we place this unique moral value on, and personhood is centered around the capacity to deploy a unique conscious experience. When we think of a person, we think of someone who is having an experience. When that experience ends, that's what we consider the death of a person. So it would only be right then to consider the start of that conscious experience the start of a person, which begins in the cortex when activated by the thalamocortical connections, and the axons and dendrites begin to form and synapses are firing throughout, which scientific consensus does say cannot happen prior to 20 weeks. So for me, legislatively, I would support no questions asked on abortion up to 20 weeks. After that, we would get into the exceptions that I believe are plausible for a doctor to accept, would be rape, incest, life of the mother, these sorts of things, because I think when it comes to fetuses, the word right is often over applied as a way to intuition pump a level of rights that we don't even give to persons. Like, sure, I have the right to life, but that right only includes others not interfering with the bare minimum required for me to live. And how much can that right really supersede other people's rights to choose what to do with their body? The analogies I always like to draw here, one more serious, one kind of silly, is if the only way that I could live would be for you to give me your heart, you wouldn't then have to give me your heart. You wouldn't be forced to do so, and you're not murdering me for refusing it. If the only way that I could live would be for Donald Trump to fly to my house and lay his hand on my forehead, he wouldn't have to come to my house and lay his hand on his forehead, and he wouldn't be murdering me not to do so. But when it comes to fetuses, there is this level of force that comes with their prescribed rights, when in reality, not even persons have the right to use force to live. Most people don't think a person on an unconscious person on end-of-life care who is only kept alive by machines has a right to live that supersedes their family's right to end care, whether it be trauma purposes, financial, or whatever the reason, even though it is a human and it is technically alive. And that is because killing isn't unjust because it ends a life, but because it ends this conscious experience that we place a moral value on. So to me, invoking life as a justification to restrict abortion is kind of begging the question, because you must show why it's unjust to end a life. And this is the the juxtaposition that I propose with fetuses, that looking at abortion as the right to kill isn't necessarily the right way to view the matter, as it's more so the right of the pregnant person to not be pregnant. So just invoking life isn't a justification, where that's not what makes killing immoral. It's what makes killing killing, but not all killing is immoral.
Okay. Yeah. Well, my opening would be that I agree with you on like the medical terms and stuff, but I just don't agree on the timing, because the way I look at it, I don't think women should be. I think women should be denied abortions after 21 days, unless it's cases of like medical exemptions where the baby is like totally not viable, and or it could be harmful to the mother as well. And in cases of rape, I think the morning after pill or like other alternatives to the morning after pill should be administered as a standard procedure. Do you know, like the day after or as soon as possible. Do you know what I mean? And like I say, the easy access to abortion, I think, has led to like a decline in the birth rate in Western cultures. Like with 50.1% of women now at the age of 30 are not having kids, and like they haven't got much time left after that. I mean, women's fertility drops, don't it, at a certain age, like 35-ish. It's sort of really bad. So I think that's a detrimental effect that abortion has on society. And yeah, so that's it really. I mean, that's basically my views, and it's pretty similar to yours, but it's just the timing kind of thing. It's like I agree. Like if women are raped, or like, I mean, I see incest as basically the same thing as rape, because if it's incest, someone's had it happen to them that they didn't want it to. If some two people are engaging in incest, they probably aren't going to be telling anyone about it and going and get abortions. Do you know what I mean? They're probably going to be. It's probably so. I just see it as a rape issue basically. So there's no really like, yeah. So I mean that's where I see it, like on the timing.
So I guess the two things, the inputs that I would have would be, I think there's a lot that goes into the declining birth rate. I think a lot of it has to do also with like the liberation of women, which I do feel like I think from what you've said in your emails, we probably disagree on that a little bit. So we don't have to like go on that tangent, but I think a lot of it has to do more so with like the liberation of women, where like older generations, they were seen where like their sole purpose was to start a family, to stay at home. Like you have to do this thing, like that's what kind of gave them their purpose. And now like women are finding the ability to gain purpose through work, through careers, through other passions, just like the same that men have had the ability to do. And I think through that, so then like less women are just being set up kind of as like what I would describe as like baby making factories, which is kind of immoral to me. More so they're just seen as people. And then also my biggest gripe would be at 21 days, almost nobody would know that they're pregnant. They wouldn't have any signs of being pregnant. They wouldn't have any way to tell. Most people don't even know until 5 or 6 weeks, which is why I disagree with a lot of the states that ban it at like 6 weeks, because banning it at 21 days would pretty much be a total ban. Like, do you like understand that at least?
Oh yeah, of course. But I mean, once you've engaged in sex, then there's the possibility that you're going to have conceived a baby. So, I mean, if you're taking responsibility, I mean, if you're responsible to go and have sex with someone, obviously in cases of rape, it's a different story. They would get the like I say, a standard procedure where the next day or whatever, there's like morning after pills being administered or whatever they need. And then like, um, yeah, so that's it basically. Like, I don't think, I mean, 21 days is when the approximate time that a heartbeat is supposed to be like detectable, or like it starts in the womb, the heartbeat. So I think that's why I think it's like not a viable. Obviously, you couldn't have it outside the womb, but it's like it's a life to me, sort of thing. That's when it's a viable life.
Do you think that like a person who's on end of life care that doesn't have brain function but is on a machine and like their heart's still pumping, do you think that ending that end of life care is like immoral in the same way?
Well, I mean, it depends on obviously the situation that the person's got with their next of kin, don't it? It's like it's not immoral if it's their choice. If I mean, obviously, if it was an accident and they had
I
no
just
no,
mean like for the scenario, like let's say like they haven't said at all whether or not like they would want taken off the machine, anything like that. Like a traumatic accident just happens and they're like 25 and they get put on a machine, and the doctors say like the machine could keep them alive till they're 80, but they'll have to stay on the machine the entirety of their life. Do you think it would be immoral if like let's say the family financially couldn't handle that or something and wanted to end the end of life care? Is it immoral just because the heart is beating?
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, I wouldn't personally. I mean, if it was my own family, I wouldn't personally want to take them off the life support. But I mean, I can't see why it would be immoral because obviously they're basically not with us anymore. Like if they're, but
Yeah,
I mean,
so
the baby, like a fetus in the womb, that's got the potential to be alive. It's got the potential to grow into like a human being. I mean, that's kind of a different scenario.
yeah, so I mean, I don't necessarily know that that matters too much because again, and what I'm trying to get at here is what we place this value on of this moral value on is personhood, and the personhood is directly tied in with that conscious experience, like your ability to have memories, to have feelings, to have all of these things that go together to create the unique experience that humans have. And in the same way that someone on end of life care doesn't experience that, neither does a fetus. So I don't understand, I guess. I just feel like it's a bit logically inconsistent to like understand why people could morally, like not immorally, end of life care, but then in the same way, like the mother who then like in that kind of technicality would be like next of kin couldn't decide to terminate what isn't a person that doesn't have the
It's
unique
just the
conscious
potential
experience,
side.
the brain
Is
function. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
obviously is the potential factor. Obviously, the baby or the fetus or the it's got the potential of life. Whereas if the doctors determined this person is brain dead, their brain's never. I mean, brain cells don't really regenerate. So if this person is brain dead and they've had an accident to the point where their brain's not going to recover, then there's no potential for life.
So then would your answer change if like let's just say like in the hypothetical like they're on the machine and there's a chance that 50 years down the line or you I mean we could even make it applicable to birth 9 months there's a chance that 9 months down the line they could come off of the machine but nobody knows. Is it then immoral to end the end of life care?
Yeah, I would say then it's a moral. Yeah.
That's consistent. I don't think most people would agree with that. I think there's a reason that we're allowed to end of life care even in situations like that. And again, for me, I think it's because when you're talking about rights, especially rights that are granted societally, it's more applicable to people who have this conscious experience, and that's why like while assisted suicide is illegal because we see those people as persons, ending end of life care isn't because it's not viewed as a person, it's viewed as a human. The same way that if somebody was still alive, let's say they haven't answered the organ donor question, so you don't know if they want to be an organ donor or not, and their brain function's done. Like by all definitions of what we would call dead, they're dead, but obviously your organs can still function, their heart's still beating. So in terms of human life, it's still alive, right? But that conscious experience is over. Would it be immoral to use that person's organs to save somebody else's life?
So what's the situation? Sorry, they're still they're on end of life care.
Like their brain function is done. They have no more brain function, but their organ, like their heart is still pumping. Would it be immoral to use that like and there's a girl, at the hospital that needs a heart or something, whoever, and would it be immoral to use that person's organs because their heart is still beating? So technically they still would be alive, but their brain function has ceased.
Well, I mean, if there's no chance, like we were saying earlier, of like if the doctors said that's it, and I mean, I think it would be immoral, but only from the families that I think the only the families whose person would be on would see it that way. Like, I mean, the father and mother of the daughter who needs the heart, they would probably see it as different. They would see it as moral. That's why it's probably like subjective, really, in it, like the morality in it.
I think it would almost be immoral to refuse someone who is alive, who is a person having a conscious experience, the ability to continue that conscious experience by refusing to take the organs out of someone who will not have that conscious experience anymore. And for me, and for a lot of people, like this is why organ donations exist, is because like there's a different moral value placed on humans and people.
Yeah.
So then the other question I want to ask, do you think that, because I feel like this is what you said, but before I go into it, I don't want to like misquote you or misrepresent your position. Were you saying that you think that if someone has sex, that opens them up to the responsibility of having a baby to where if they don't realize that they're pregnant after 21 days, like it's their fault almost, or like how would you kind of
Yeah, I'd say yeah, that's like part of the responsibility of having sex, and I think that's why like it's caused like the liberation in like not just women and in men. Like it's not but just women. It's both the sexes. They're both kind of like got no responsibility anymore. They're just it's just frivolous. Like they're just like whereas before, like 100 years ago, it was like if you had sex, there was a very high chance that the woman was probably going to get pregnant. So obviously, once you've engaged in sex, you should be aware that there's a chance that you're going to be pregnant. So you should be on the ball, should be getting checked or whatever.
Yeah, so I don't really think that's very logically consistent either. And I also think that that would lead to like a lot of like kind of crazy outcomes if like women had to like go get like checked every time that they had sex and things like that. But I think engaging in an act that may result in X outcome doesn't then justify X outcome. Like for instance, if somebody leaves their house and they leave their door unlocked on accident, and then they come back, and when they get back to their house, somebody has broken into their house and is stealing their stuff, do they just then have to say, well, I did leave my door unlocked, so there's nothing I can do now?
No, well, I mean, it's a different situation. Obviously, I mean, with a life, when you're having sex, that's like the fundamental thing between men and women, like since the age of time that
Sex
we've
isn't just for reproduction, though. Plenty of people have sex for just enjoyment, personal enjoyment.
that's hard. I mean, obviously, it's okay to have it for enjoyment, but you should only be having it with someone that you're committed with, that you're willing to have a baby with, and you're willing to take that responsibility with. It shouldn't. That's why it's become so like irresponsible and so like widespread, and people are like getting abortions left, right, and center because it's just it's okay now. It's like whereas before people had a responsibility, they waited till marriage or they waited till they was with someone who they knew was going to be their life partner.
Well, that's
And
a bit subjective, don't you think? Like that's like your personal opinion, which is fine, like to have a subjective belief, but I just don't get why we would legislate laws on subjective something that is subjective to where plenty of people would disagree with you. Like I disagree with you personally. Why should I have to adhere to something that I don't believe?
I know what you're saying, but I mean, it causes a detrimental effect on society, don't it? It's not just your personal self. It's not
What's
just
the
subjective
detrimental effect?
because of the frivolous sex and the widespread promiscuity. It leads to bad mental health. It leads to STDs. It leads to like abortion rates. Like mental health in women is like women that have got mental health once they've had an abortion, they're going to be a lot worse. Like it's studies have shown that.
Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with most of that. And again, I feel like that would be like that's we could do a debate on just that, I'm sure. But I don't think that again, doing something that may result in X outcome just because X outcome then happens doesn't justify that. Like for instance, a lot of people drink for fun, but if you drink, like it could also kill you, like or even like drug use, whatever it is. Do you think that if somebody drinks because they know that they could die doing this, that they shouldn't be allowed to have like their stomach pumped or something?
No, I mean they should be allowed, but obviously
But
people should
wouldn't
still.
they in the same way be engaging in an act that could be like detrimental then?
Yeah, of course, yeah. But obviously, people are still obliged to guide them and tell them what they're doing is wrong.
Yeah, but you wouldn't support like banning drinking because that's a possibility, is it? Would you?
Well, I mean, no, I wouldn't support. Well, I mean, if probably actually, to be honest, thinking about it, because drinking, I don't drink myself. It's not poison. I think drinking's worse than like the cannabis. Than do you know what I mean? Drink is actually a poison for your body. It's that's what it does to you. It poisons your brain and makes you.
Well, I mean, what if even about weed? Like there's studies of like how, and I mean, I know there's conflicting studies, but there's also studies about how like smoking more can cause anxiety. It can cause things like depression. Like it can also worsen mental conditions. Like, I mean, and I don't, given you know what I see in the video, I don't think you would support banning cannabis at least. So like, and that could also have detrimental effects on society. So I just don't understand like how that would be logically consistent. I feel like it's not really upheld to the same standard.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, see, weed. I mean, there's like you say, it's subjective. It's like there's a lot of studies that show this. There's a lot of studies that show that. Same thing about anything, I suppose. I mean, I could pull up the mental health studies about abortion, and obviously you could still dispute them and say this or say that, but it's one of them. But obviously the main line is the way I see abortion causes like frivolous behavior where people, I mean, obviously in medical conditions it's fine, yeah, but it causes people to be irresponsible and like just not take responsibility in what they're doing.
Yeah, but there's plenty of things to do that. And we don't ban each and every one of those that could lead to frivolous things. And then also you have to think of the inverse to where if it was totally banned, there's plenty of like frivolous things that would still, or I guess maybe not frivolous, but like detrimental outcomes would still happen if you're forcing women to have births they don't want. Like you're putting children in homes where they aren't wanted. There's plenty of data that shows the matter that like if a parent hasn't planned for a pregnancy or doesn't want a pregnancy, typically they have less of a relationship with their child. They could put them up for adoption. There's plenty of data on the matter that kids raised in like group homes, for instance, or adoption homes have far worse outcomes than those raised in a two-person household. It could be like if it's a woman who's not ready or the man's not ready, the man leaves, you're subjecting a kid to live in with a single mom, where again, studies show that two parents in a household react to better outcomes. So how do you justify allowing those detrimental things to happen, but the other detrimental things that you subjectively just don't like should be imposed on everyone?
Well, I mean, obviously, I mean, when you're saying about kids growing up in homes where they're not wanted and whatever, I think that's a much better option than them not having the chance at life. Whereas, like, just aborting them because you haven't got, like, if you feel like you're not in the right financial position. These are my main issues. It's like people that are just willy-nilly getting abortions because they're not in the financial position they think they should be in, or they're not quite at the right time in their life, and that's like valid to end like someone's possible life, whether it be with you or not, whether it could be in a foster home or whatever. Like people still have the chance then. Like obviously people that come from foster homes, I know they don't have the best like chance in life, but they still have that chance. That's my main issue with the whole abortion thing.
So I guess and the other question I had was about kind of what you said about like rape victims. Do you think that somebody who was raped and maybe they were like too traumatized by it to come forward, they didn't want to go to the doctor, they didn't want to do these things, because I mean a lot of women it affects them in a way that makes them want to like isolate themselves rather than to come out and let people know that this happened to them. They feel a lot more victimized when they do that. So let's say like a woman gets sexually assaulted, she is traumatized, doesn't come forward, and she realizes after 21 days, like let's say I don't know, 10 weeks later, she realizes, oh, I'm pregnant. Like she starts having the physical signs or whatnot. She gets a test, she realizes she's pregnant. You're saying that you would not allow that woman to get an abortion?
Probably not, to be honest. No, if I was to write in the law, I'd say because obviously I know, like you say, it's a traumatic time, and like they're probably going through a lot, but it's still like the life I think supersedes like a lot of things. So it should be the response, like you should have inside you a responsible sort of feeling to know whether or not you're pregnant or not and get it dealt with. I mean, there might be certain circumstances if it's like a violent, some like a rape or something, and she's
I would think all
been,
rapes would constitute
well, I mean,
violence.
like like aggravated, like say if there was beating them, or do you know what I mean? If there was like injuries involved or something, like then maybe there's certain circumstances where I suppose yeah, I'd probably
Why does that
allow,
change for you? Just out of curiosity, why would that change it if they were beaten or not?
just because I mean it could be a lot more traumatic. I mean, it's circumstantial. It's like it's hard to put an exact like thing on it, but yeah, like I mean, in certain circumstances, it would be
So
hard to just to fish through the what had actually happened. But like, I just still think from the beginning they should have everyone should have a certain responsibility about themselves, like about himself or about whatever's going on around them, and they should be dealing with things. I mean, everyone has to go through horrible things like people in war, people like every single day, people go through traumatic things. But I think people need to take responsibility, basically.
I'm just curious because I don't know if that's like really logically applicable. What if somebody was raped but not beaten, but like was more traumatized than somebody who was beaten and raped? Would you allow that person to have an abortion? So it's just like,
That's what I'm. That's what I mean. That's why it's like circumstantial. I mean, I
so
couldn't really go on.
sorry, you go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say I couldn't really put like an exact uh script of what I would do in that situation because it's obviously it's a bit like you say, it's really circumstantial. It's like, but like, I mean, 3 weeks, 21 days. That's a long time, really.
You normally
From
don't
when
show symptoms within the first 3 weeks, though.
I know, but they know it's happened. Like obviously, whether they've had sex or like they've been raped, which is fucking obviously unfortunate, but like either way, they know it's happened. Do you know what I mean? So 3 weeks is still enough time. I mean, they're gonna have to probably go to the doctor. So it's just a case of, I mean, you can order probably the morning after pills and stuff over the internet or whatever. It's just that's a big thing. That's a responsibility. That's a life
I think that's
that
assuming a lot though, because like what if one they could not be in a financial position to buy something like the morning after pill? It could be like someone who's homeless and has absolutely no money to their name. They could not have insurance to even go see a doctor. Like there's a lot of like mitigating circumstances I feel like you're overlooking to say that like, well, they could just do all these things when a lot of people couldn't.
yeah, yeah. I sort of know what you're saying. In certain circumstances, like say if it was a homeless person, yeah, what could they do? I mean, but still, there's doctors that could go to the doctor. I mean, of course, the doctors. Oh, I don't know how it works in America. Obviously, it's different
Yeah, I'm
with
about to
you.
say it might be different in the UK, but if you go to the doctor here without insurance, you're looking at like 10 grand that you're gonna
Yeah,
have
they
to.
kick you out the door. That's what I
Yeah.
mean. It's different situation, and it's like over here. I mean, for women, they can just go straight to the doctor the next day.
Mhm. Yeah,
No,
so I just what quick not to go on the tyrant or too much tirade too much to derail it, but do you guys have like is it like guaranteed health? Like does everyone can you just get healthcare services if you need over there?
yeah,
Yeah.
literally, you can get like you can come over on a bloody boat, and the next day you can get healthcare here. It's that
Yeah.
easy.
So I guess I got to see maybe where you're building your worldview from because in America, like a lot of what you're saying literally couldn't be possible for a lot of people. Like especially
Yeah, yeah,
like if
that's
you
probably where
go.
I'm because I mean, my more issue is with England really because I mean they allow abortions up to 26 weeks here, like no questions asked. It's like 26 weeks is like it's a baby. Like there's no denying that
They're
it's
going off
got.
viability then probably, huh?
Say it again, sorry.
They go off like viability then.
Well, I mean, babies have been born at like 21 weeks, haven't they?
There's been cases of I think the earliest baby was born at like literally 21 weeks, but like in most cases, fetuses aren't viable till like 24 or 26 weeks. Like typically, the 21 week that's like a rarity, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I know what you're saying, but still, I mean, if it's possible, then it shouldn't be it shouldn't even be allowed. It shouldn't be even thought of. If it's possible that the baby can survive without the mother now, then I mean, is it true that I seen the other day? I don't know whether it was just a bit of Twitter propaganda, but I seen a map of the US and it was saying there was 9 states still in America that you can get full-term abortion.
Yeah, it's a bit of misinformation. What well to clarify, in America, 99.5% of abortions happen prior to 22 weeks. So like pretty much every abortions happen prior to 22 weeks. In the third trimester, all abortions that happen are because of medical necessity. Either the mother's life is in jeopardy or it's like a fatal fetal anomaly. Like the pregnancy wouldn't be viable anyway. So when it comes to like those states allow those circumstances like for abortion. But it's like you can't walk in at 9 months and be like, hey, my baby's due in 2 weeks, but I don't want a baby anymore. Like there's not a doctor that's gonna do an abortion procedure like that. And also, I think if you think about it, it's kind of ridiculous on its face too, because you got to think like who's going to carry a baby for 9 months and then be like, I want to abort this because I mean, still, like,
Uh,
even with an abortion procedure, you're still going through like the physical conditions imposed upon birth, especially at 9 months. Like it's still going to wreck your body. You know what I mean? So like
yeah,
that's like a traumatic decision and like a very serious decision people have to make. They're not like willy nilly just getting abortions at 9 months.
Well, it's just because I mean you see a lot of stuff, don't you, on Twitter and stuff, and it was actually like I can't remember her name now, but it was this journalist woman in America, and she rang up one of these clinics and asked, like she said, I'm full term, blah blah blah, and they said, yeah, just come down, we'll get it sorted for you. Do you know what I
Yes,
mean? It's like
you see things like that all the time, and Trump, like Trump himself, he'll go around and he'll say, there's states where you can have an abortion after the baby's born, and it's like that's like
yeah,
literally murder. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
it's just I don't know. Just people try to go on these tirades to kind of like there's propaganda on all sides. You know what I mean? And that's like one of those bits of propaganda is like they're trying to kill babies at 9 months and after the birth and like all this and that. But
Yeah, he's nuts, any Trump. He's a funny geezer though. I do like Trump. It's one of
he's
them.
funny. I don't like him. I like his personality in some ways. Like I think he's funny. I just think he's like so detrimental to America. But so I did want to just to kind of jump back to like the rape topic we were talking about. I had a hypothetical that I like to ask people when they talk about the responsibility of life and how you should accept it even if you were raped, which again, not your choice to get pregnant, not your choice to have sex, it's just imposed upon you. The hypothetical is if you were kidnapped by this group of people and they like drug you, whatever, you get knocked out and you wake up in a room and you're connected to another human, and a doctor comes in and says, sorry, a doctor comes in and says, I don't know who kidnapped you. I'm sorry that they did it. It's terrible that they did, but now that you're here, you're connected to this person of whom you have to be connected to for the next 9 months in order for them to live. To unplug yourself from them would be to murder them, would be they would die. Would you morally then have to accept that?
No, I don't think so. I think you'd be it'd be fine if you said no, I want to be disconnected. I
So
think
what's
that'd
the
be
difference? What's the difference in that situation from somebody who's raped?
than somebody who's raped.
In both cases, we're talking about a life, and in both cases, the circumstances were imposed on you. You didn't ask for them to happen.
Well, the only difference I would see is because the mother and the fetus or baby, they're biologically like connected. There's a sort of moral responsibility on the mother to protect the baby's life, like and to try and give it a chance at life. Whereas the person who is being kidnapped and put in that situation, then obviously they've got no moral obligation to that person whatsoever. They don't know him; it's a stranger. But obviously, I mean, in like because it's a case of rape, it's sort of like you say in the same situation where it's just a random stranger. But then obviously, like that's where my argument would be. It's the biological connection between the mother and the child.
Well, like morality doesn't have to do with biology, though. I feel like I mean, because like if you kill someone and then you kill your brother, it's murder either way. You're not going to get like a higher degree of murder because like you have a biological connection to that person.
I know what you mean, but it's like it's the responsibility factors. Like you've got a responsibility to protect your child. That's the natural order of society of life. Like your child is vulnerable and helpless until they're of a certain age, and you've got a responsibility to protect them, whether they're in the womb or not.
Well, in that case, it's not a child, it's a fetus. There's biological differences between a fetus and a child with like the way they breathe and the way they receive nutrients and these kinds of things. But then also like I guess, but I think that it's more so the responsibility that you have with a child is put upon you once you bring that child into life, like the fact that you brought this life, like you brought this person into life, into the world. They're only here because of you. I think that that's why these responsibilities and expectations can be placed upon you. So I think that like if you don't want to have a child, if you didn't ask to have one, you didn't even have sex, like these conditions were like forced upon you and you don't want any of it. I don't know if I would agree that there's any just like inherent responsibility that you have to a fetus, like something that, in my opinion, isn't even a person.
So I mean, what let me say that, like ask you this then: if a woman was to get raped and then go home, is she allowed to kill her born son?
Like, like, like the son that was born from rape.
He's already no, he's already born, and she's already got a son at home, but she's just been raped, and then she goes home. Is she allowed to kill a live son?
No, and I don't understand how that's analogous, really.
Because obviously the son is nothing to do with the man who's raped the woman. Do you know what I mean? But it's still her son. he's still like whether he's born or not. I mean, if you're saying life begins at conception, I still I'm not 100. Like I know life begins at conception, like when they meet, whatever. But like I more agree with when the heartbeat starts. Like that's when I'm more concerned about the baby. But obviously, it's still either way her child.
So I think that's different for a few reasons. Like first and foremost, again, I would think that there's responsibilities and expectations that can get placed on you that are different once you bring someone into the world. Like then it's like they're here because of you. At this point, they depend on you. Like you chose to birth this person. They're here now, right? But then also, and even more so, it's more about like the negative effects that can be imposed upon you from that pregnancy that differentiates it. While if you get raped, like your normal, like your already born son doesn't have the chance, one, to kill you during the pregnancy, doesn't have a chance to like make you like give you like the depression, anxiety, whatever postpartum. Like there's a slew of like mental conditions that can come from a pregnancy. There's physical there's detrimentally physically things that can be imposed upon you from death, from other physical conditions. Like you could be
Yeah, but I mean, obviously, we already said that if they had a medical condition, that's fine.
Well,
So
no, I mean like so
and
I
and like the
kind of
studies show that I mean, women that have abortion and women that don't, that have the sort of forced pregnancy, the mental health is basically the same. They increase at the same rates as they would either way, whether they had the abortion or not.
I'm pretty sure there's conflicting studies on that. I mean, there's conflicting studies on about anything that you can look at. But what I'm talking about is like for instance, you can give birth in a way that prevents you from being able to reproduce further in the future. So you would take that away from a woman to force her to have an unwanted pregnancy, who then might in the future want to have a child and want to like actually start a family with somebody, and then now she's unable to do that because she was like raped at like 13 or something.
No, I mean, if that's different, like if a girl's underage,
Well, okay, I mean,
then
like 20 then in that case.
yeah, I mean, if she's 20, like well, I mean, that's just it's sort of a sort of it's only like a 1 in a million chance that they're going to lose their like reproduction possibilities once they've had the baby. That's not really like a something you can call on because
What if
I
it's a
mean,
situation where, like, just in the hypothetical, the doctor knows, like, they just know, and they can say, if you have this pregnancy, like, you will not be able to reproduce in the future.
well, that's a medical complication, really, isn't it? Like I would class that as a medical complication. Like that's something that's going to cause a detrimental effect to the woman.
Okay, so then to be clear, you do believe in like exceptions for like medical things.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah. For anything to do with medical, that's going to have some sort of effect on the mother. That's long term, especially in the case of like rape. Then of course, yeah. Like, but obviously, my main problem, like I said, is just with people getting abortions just for the sake of it because they can't be bothered to have a child or some sort of financial issue, which
So
everybody has to deal with. Like it's not like something. It's just a selfish reason to get an abortion is because oh, I'm not ready.
I mean, I could agree that maybe it's selfish in some situations, but I also think that like one, we don't like legislate against like selfishness. But I'm curious about like why you feel that way. If your thing is like life and like you have to protect this life because it's vulnerable and all these things, why would a medical complication from a different person who, in your opinion, has a biological responsibility or however you would describe it to protect that life, why does just a medical condition change that?
Because it's causing like harm to the mother, whereas a natural pregnancy wouldn't cause harm. It wouldn't. It would just be like I mean, she might get sickness and probably a few pains and whatnot, but that's just natural. Like comes with childbirth, but like some sort of health implication that couldn't completely change her life. I mean, up to a certain point, I wouldn't like if it come to like 7, 8, 9 months, then that would be a no, basically. But I mean, before a certain time, yeah, if you knew it was going to have a detrimental effect on the mom, then I would probably say there'd be some sort of maybe try and have the baby like removed before or something and have it uh try and keep it alive if it's far enough gone, keep it alive outside the womb or but Yeah, if there's a medical complication, like I think then it's fair enough for the mum to say at an early enough point, no, I need to get rid of it, basically.
See, I think that kind of proves my point, though, that I think that if just because of medical complication, you're fine with the mother making the decision, that we place like a different moral value on people, like persons, living persons, rather than just what is a human.
But that's why I said obviously it'd have to be in an earlier time. It wouldn't like if it come to a point where the baby's viable, then I don't think it should be allowed. I think she should still have to either go through with the pregnancy or like have some sort of procedure where she could like a cesarean or something where she can have the baby taken out like
What
medically.
if she was 26 weeks pregnant, like viability, whatever you want to call viability, 28 weeks, like somewhere the fetus is viable. And the doctor tells her, hey, we just discovered you have a cardiac condition to where if you have this birth, regardless of how you have it, any way we do it, there's a 95% chance you will die. Do you think that the mother would be morally required to have the baby?
Well, I mean, in that situation, even probably the abortion's probably going to kill her by the sound of it. But like,
Well, it's just, like indulge in the hypothetical, like the abortion
yeah, yeah,
procedure she could live, but at birth would absolutely kill her.
yeah. If she was at 26 weeks, then yeah, if it's going to kill her, then fair enough. Yeah, you can get the abortion. But like anything after that, really, I don't know. I don't know where I'd stand on that. Really, it's like it's a life for a life. So it's kind of I don't know.
Yeah, well, so I think, and again, I think that kind of proves my point that there's just innately in most people they place more of a moral value on persons like the who rather than the what of just a human. Because I agree with you, and I think most people would agree with even if a fetus is viable, if the procedure of if birth would absolutely kill the mother and the only way for her to live would be to get an abortion, I think most people would probably bite the bullet and say, yeah, she can get the abortion. And I think that kind of goes into the point that I have with the whole thing, which is that we place a moral value on personhood. What we protect are people or persons. When we talk about rights, it's who gets rights. It's not what gets rights, right? Like we define rights for persons. Murder in and of itself is the unlawful killing of a person, not of a human. So I just think that why would we legislate these kind of rights, which is also have to be forcefully applied to give rights to what is not a person, to take away rights from a person?
Well, just because like I mean, you class personhood as what someone having like a conscience and someone who's like able to think and that like that's what you're saying when you say like a person.
Yeah, like the
Like you got
unique conscious experience that humans have.
yeah. So I mean like because it's still to me after a certain point, it's still to me a person. It's still like it's still got a life ahead of it. I see like the fetus baby after a certain point as a life, like it shouldn't be disregarded. It should have, I mean, rights are a social construct anyway. They're just like made up basically, and they, but like it should still have the same basic rights as any human, like right to happiness, right to life, right to like, do you know the fundamental rights?
Well, I would agree with you, but the problem when you get into that is the right to life is a negative right. That's kind of what I was getting into in my opening. I have the right to life, but I don't have the right to force you to like give me part of your body to survive. So like when we talk about human rights, I think that the best way to do human rights is to apply them equally throughout the board. When you stop applying human rights equally throughout the board, it leads to things like slavery, where some humans are getting the same rights and some humans have more rights. So like human rights need to be applied equally across the board. So if we're talking about the right to life, why would a fetus get this positive right to life, like the right to force you to help it live when I don't have that right?
It's like it's only in cases though where it's gonna kill the mother though. So I mean, it's still that's like comes under the medical circumstances, really, don't it? So if it's a life for a life,
Well,
then
no,
you're
I'm just
talking
talking
about
about like in normal, like it's like nothing's wrong. Like in this situation, nothing's complicated with the birth. Like we're just talking about why if I can't for like right now, my mom, I can't force my mom to give me her heart to live. Why can a fetus force its mom to give her to take the that it she has to give it its nutrients, she has to eat for the baby, she has to like it takes from her body, like I don't, I'm not gonna get into all the biology of a birth, but like why can a fetus force these rights upon someone in a way that I can't?
Because, like I say, I still see it as like a person, like a baby who's a month old that can't survive without its mother. Like, not it's not feeding off its mother's body, but it's still, if you left the baby on its own in a room for a week, a newborn baby, you're gonna come back to a dead baby. It's not going to be alive anymore. It needs external factors to survive. So it's still a person to me, basically, like whether it's in the womb and it's being supplied by its mother, or it's out the womb and it's being fed by its mother. Either way, it's still got to be helped to a certain point where it's old enough to look after itself, which is for most of us not old, 25, 30.
Right. Yeah. No. No. See, I, in some ways agree with you, but I think that those rights are instilled into a baby because one, it's a person, and two, because it's in society. Like once you're brought into society, you're given extra protections and things that you wouldn't otherwise if you weren't in society. Like for instance, you right now, if you bought a plane ticket to America in 9 months, for the next 9 months, you wouldn't be like protected under American law. Like, but once you come into America, then you're held to the standard of American law. So I think it's a bit different in that way, in that a fetus, one, I wouldn't consider it a person. I know that you would, so we don't have to go around the circle on that. But it's also like not entered into society. It's like something that is fully dependent on someone in society, but it's not in society.
I mean, it's like there's certain circumstances. Like, I mean, people have been charged with murder for killing a fetus before, haven't they? Like, not that long ago.
So
Like,
most courts typically don't uphold that. There have been a lot of people
yeah,
charged with like double homicide or something if they kill like a pregnant person. Most courts don't uphold the charge, but I do believe there's like a couple people who have been successfully prosecuted for that. But typically, like it gets appealed to like higher courts, at least in America. I don't know about like abroad or anything, but in America, most of these cases will get appealed to our higher courts, like the state Supreme Courts, and then they won't uphold the double homicide ruling. I
yeah. I
don't know if
mean,
that's different in the UK or not. I don't know how your like legal system works or whatnot.
it's different for everybody, isn't it? Because I mean, people will say like people will talk about a fetus like in certain circumstances, like say if like the royal princess is pregnant or something, they'll say the royal baby she's with royal baby, like she's pregnant with the royal baby, like, but then in other circumstances people will call it a fetus, like, so it's wherever you're coming from, really, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, I think a lot of that's just like semantic differences, but like for me, it's like, we wouldn't call like a seed a tree, right? We wouldn't, if you have all the parts to a car, but they're scattered about your house, you're not going to call that a car. Like we don't, if you're talking about like the actual reality of things, just because something will become something doesn't mean it is that. I think in saying that it will become is right there the admission that it's not the same. So like a fetus and a baby aren't the same thing, but like semantically people will call them the same because it's just like easier in terms of language, but that doesn't make them the same thing.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, well, I mean, it's one of them. I mean, hopefully, the way I see it's society needs help. Like, people are lost. Like, there's people from all angles that are got their wires twisted, and social media doesn't help. And like, I think we all need to get grounded, start taking responsibility for ourselves.
See, I agree with you on a lot of the sentiment, but I feel like we would probably have some grave disagreements on how we would go about helping society, I'm sure.
Yeah, 100%.
So yeah, did you have any other like lines of questioning that you had for my position or anything like that?
What's no, not really. All good. We pretty much went over everything I wrote down from your opening anyway. So
Cool. Yeah, I don't think I have any more for you. Do you want to, you can give a like a brief closing, just sum up your position one more time, and then I will, and we can wrap it up.
yeah, so I think like women should be denied abortion after 21 days from conception, as that's when the approximate time the heartbeat begins in the womb, unless there are medical complications and it's not a viable pregnancy. And in cases of rape, the morning after pill or other alternatives should be administered immediately. Obviously, I mean, in cases like you say in America, it's not that easy because it's not free. But like in the UK, they've got the opportunity to get it dealt with immediately, which is no excuse really. I mean, obviously you got the mental health implications that come with traumatic experiences, but like you've got 3 weeks to get your health in order. Like you've got the possibility of bringing a life into the world. That's a big responsibility. So that they need to they've got time there to get it done. And like I said, the easy access to abortion I think has led to like has not led to it entirely, but it's definitely a defining factor in the fact that people are just not taking responsibility for their sex life anymore. It's leading to a like wide scale promiscuity in people. Yeah, that's it really. That's the way I think about it.
Yeah, how I would sum it up is I just think 21 days would be pretty much a complete ban. I wouldn't support a complete ban on abortion, so I would never support something like a 21-week or 21-day ban. I think that basing it off the heartbeat is a bit inconsistent because, like in other situations, like in end of life care, we don't value the heartbeat and things like that. So, and same with like people who need hearts or with organ donors, we don't think that organ donations are immoral because the heart is beating. So I think that it's kind of like inconsistent to place like certain rights on some humans, but different rights on the other. I think that human rights should be equal across the board. And then just to sum up my position, I think that at 20 weeks, legislatively, I would support the ban happening at 20 weeks. After that, I would support exceptions for rape, for incest, life of the mother, things like that, the common exceptions you hear. I think prior to 20 weeks, we're talking about something that isn't a person. It doesn't have the ability to deploy a unique conscious experience, which I think makes it innately different than humans who do have the ability to deploy that conscious experience. So for me, if we're talking legislatively, again, 20 weeks is probably where I would be comfortable signing a ban, just because that would cut out anyone who possibly could. It's kind of like the developing a conscious experience is kind of like pregnancy. You can't pin down exactly when it starts. It's between 20 to 35 weeks, but scientific consensus is that it can't be earlier than 20 weeks. So then, yeah, so for me, 20 weeks is where I would draw the line.